Hello there, thrill seekers. And I got a question in the comments, and I'm going to read it to you. Here it goes. Hi, sir. Oh, this person called me sir. Can you please tell me what is the matter with Buddhism and eating meat? I mean, I know you are a vegetarian, but a lot of Buddhists, including monks, do eat meat. Now, does that not violate the precept of no killing any sentient beings? At least for the lay practitioners, could you please clarify this issue to me? Thank you. Okay, that's a very polite question, so I'll answer it as politely as possible. The questioner is right. The first Buddhist precept is don't destroy life, and my teacher explains this as we all have our life. The universe is life itself. We should not destroy that of which we are a part. We should not destroy life in vain. And if you want to look it up, about a year ago I did a video about the first precept with a very obvious title, First Precept, Do Not Kill. Let me make sure that's right. Yep, that's the title of it. First Precept, Do Not Kill. So you can go look at that if you want to see my whole shtick on the first precept. And we can kind of go past that. So Hinduism, which is, I always say this, but a kind of a catch-all term for a lot of related religions in India. But I think it's fair to say that most forms of Hinduism have a prohibition against eating meat. And if the Hare Krishnas are anyone's to go by, I can tell you how they view it. They view eating meat as something that produces bad karma for the individual, for society as a whole. And I remember once one of the Hare Krishna guys, explained this to an audience. Maybe I asked the question, what would happen to a little kid who, eats hot dogs and they have no idea what hot dogs are? Are they still getting the bad karma of killing an animal by eating a hot dog? And the Hare Krishna guy said, yes, they are. It's just like if a little kid who doesn't know that a red stove, an electric stove where the thingy is red, is hot and touches it, they will still get burned. So it doesn't matter whether you know it's meat or not, whether you know it's a dead animal or not, you still get the karma from it. Well, Buddhism, at least early Buddhism, did not take that view. So here's a few things from the Pali Canon, which are the oldest forms, the oldest written texts of Buddhism, arguably. Some people say there's some older things, but anyway. The Buddha rejected Devadatta's idea of forbidding monks to eat meat. So Devadatta was a guy who caused a lot of controversy in the early Buddhist Sangha. Sometimes he's even accused of trying to murder the Buddha. Depends on who you ask. But anyway, he was one of Buddha's monks. And they were also forbidden from engaging in businesses that involved meat. So that's kind of a tricky thing. But the thing is, they were supposed to live only by what they could beg. So the Buddha said that if they're living, they basically put out a begging bowl and sit in the street, for a while and take whatever is given. Whatever is given, they were supposed to accept. The criteria for when meat can be eaten go like this. I say that there are 3 instances in which meat may be eaten. When it is not seen, not heard, and not suspected, it's not seen, not heard, not suspected, that the living being has been slaughtered for the bhikkhu. So the bhikkhu is the monk. So if you don't have any reason to believe that the animal that produced this hot dog that appears in your begging bowl was slaughtered specifically for your eating pleasure, then you can eat it. That's what the Buddha supposedly said. Now, there are certain kinds of meat that are forbidden to eat. So here's the list, eat under any circumstances, and here they go. You can't eat the meat of humans, so you can't be a cannibal. Elephants, horses, dogs, snakes, lions, tigers, leopards, bears, or hyenas. And the reason is that these were forbidden either because they contradicted local customs and would bring the Sangha into disrepute, or because the meat of predatory animals was believed to be liable to provoking attack from those animals. Eating human flesh was a more serious category of offense than eating from the remaining types. So, well, that's good. Now, there's another story in the Pali Canon attributed to the Buddha Kassapa, who I believe is the Buddha who was the Buddha in the age before our age of Shakyamuni Buddha. I always get this mythology a little confused, but I'm pretty sure this is a Buddha. Well, I know this is a Buddha of the past. I think he's the one prior to our Buddha. Anyway, this is what is attributed to him. Somebody asked if meat eating is not regarded as defiled behavior, and Buddha Kashyapa says, taking life, beating, cutting, binding, adultery, this is uncleanliness and not the eating of meat. When men are rough and harsh, backbiting, treacherous, without compassion, this is uncleanliness and not the eating of meat. Anger, pride, obstinacy, antagonism, this is uncleanliness and not the eating of meat. When men of bad morals refuse to pay their debts, this is uncleanliness and not the eating of meat. When men attack living beings either because of greed or hostility and are always bent upon evil, they go to darkness after death and fall headlong into hell. This is uncleanliness and not the eating of meat. So the eating of meat is considered a lesser problem than all of these other things. Now, if we go into the Mahayana Buddhist realm and quickly, the Mahayana Buddhists are Buddhists who accept a whole lot of things that come from outside. The Pali Canon is supposedly the closest thing we have to the preserved words of the Buddha. The Mahayana scriptures were created later, and even though they are often attributed to the Buddha, everybody pretty much knows they aren't the words of the Buddha. But the Mahayana Buddhists include Zen Buddhism. In fact, most forms of Buddhism that exist today are Mahayana Buddhism, except for Theravada. So anyway, this is the Surangama Sutra, and it says, I permit bhikshus to eat only the 5 kinds of pure meat. Such meat is actually the product of my transcendental power of transformation and not of animal slaughter. Interesting concept. You, Brahman, he's talking to somebody specifically, live in a country where vegetables do not grow because it is too damp and hot and because of all the gravel and rock. I use my spiritual power of compassion to provide you with illusory meat to satisfy your appetite. So that's one way of looking at it, and I don't know if the Tibetan Buddhists actually cite this passage from this sutra, but they use a similar justification. The Dalai Lama kind of famously said something about this, where basically the idea is in Tibet it's very hard to grow vegetables, so Tibetan Buddhists eat meat unapologetically. And the Dalai Lama, I just read, he turned vegetarian when he was 65 and then turned back because his health wasn't very good. This is also the case with my own teacher. My first Zen teacher, Tim McCarthy, became a vegetarian and then kind of went back to eating some meat because of health problems, and this is fairly common. Now, one other interesting place where this comes up is in the Lankavatara Sutra, and I did a whole thing, I think about a year ago, can you see that, about the Lankavatara Sutra. But the Lankavatara Sutra, the final chapter is the rest of the Lankavatara Sutra is a really kind of in-depth examination of non-dualistic philosophy. And you can leave that for later, what that is. But the final chapter is a chapter just about how great it is to be a vegetarian, and it's so different from the rest of the sutra that it almost looks like it was stuck on later by somebody else. But according to Red Pine, who's researched this a whole lot more than me, the translator of this, he says the evidence points to it being originally part of the sutra. And here's just a little excerpt of that. It says, there are countless reasons why you should not eat meat, but I will summarize them for you. Because all beings have at some time been reborn as family members, out of your feelings for them, you shouldn't eat meat. Because butchers indiscriminately sell the flesh of donkeys and camels, foxes and dogs, cattle and horses and humans, along with that of other animals, you shouldn't eat meat. Well, probably not many butchers do that today, but, maybe in that time that was a thing. And you shouldn't eat meat because animals are raised on impurities. And you shouldn't eat meat because beings become afraid when they smell its odor, like when a dog snarls in anger and fear at the sight of a chandala or dobma. And I believe those are people who worked in the meat industry in ancient India. Yep, I'm right. I just checked that out. Yeah. Chandalas were members of a despised caste associated with the disposal of corpses. Dambas are also outcasts and associated with the cremation of corpses. Okay, so slightly different from what I said, but basically the same idea. I also heard, and I wasn't able to find this, that there's a passage in one of the Pali Canon scriptures in which a guy comes up to the Buddha and he's telling him that my dog is afraid of me. Why is my dog afraid of me? And the Buddha says, well, it's because you eat meat and the dog can smell the meat coming out of your pores and therefore always feels that he is in danger of being killed and eaten by you. So I don't eat meat and my dog is not afraid of me. He cuddles to me all the time. So that's what that says. Now let's fast forward to Dogen, and there are two passages in Shobo Genzo's Uemonki, which is the recorded sayings of Dogen as recorded by one of his disciples. So that's what Shobo Genzo's Uemonki is, and here are two of the things he says about meat in there. So here we go. Once a certain layperson came and asked, "These days, although lay people make offerings to monks and take refuge in and venerate the Buddha Dharma, much misfortune occurs. For this reason, evil thoughts have arisen and people believe they should no longer take refuge in the three treasures. What do you think of this?" Dogen replies, "This is not the fault of monks or the Buddha Dharma, but a mistake on behalf of the lay people themselves. As for the reason for this, for example, they revere and make offerings only to monks who publicly observe the precepts and the eating regulations, which is a regulation not to eat meat. So that was a clear regulation in the Zen Buddhist tradition that Dogen was part of. But they do not make offerings to shameless monks who break the precepts, drink alcohol, and eat meat, judging them to be worthless. This biased and discriminating mind truly goes against the intention of Buddha. Because of this, their taking refuge is in vain, blah, blah, blah. You should make offerings to all monks, regardless of whether they have any virtue or not." So he's basically saying that even if the monks do eat meat and break the precepts, you should still make offerings to them. You should still revere them as monks. So that's one of the things he said. Now here's another thing from Uemonki. On one occasion, Dogen said, "In the assembly of Zen master Fuzhou, there was a monk who, when he was sick, wanted to eat meat. The master allowed him to do so. One night, the master himself went into the infirmary and saw the sick monk eating meat in the dim lamplight. Although the monk thought he was putting it into his own mouth, the meat, it was not him, but the demon who was eating." So that's weird grammar. So apparently there's a demon sitting on his head. I don't know why they left that out of the story, but the demon sitting on his head is grabbing the meat and eating it for the monk before the monk can eat it. After that, whenever a sick monk wanted to eat meat, the master allowed him to do so because he knew such a monk was possessed by a demon. Now Dogen comments, "Thinking about this story, we must carefully consider whether to allow such a thing or not. There was also an instance of eating meat in the assembly of Wuzhu Faiyun. Whether allowing or prohibiting it, all the ancient masters surely had their own deep considerations." So he kind of leaves it up to us to figure out. And that's kind of where it stands in my own experience. As I said, my first Zen teacher was, he called it himself a liberal vegetarian, which he said was like being a liberal celibate. Like, I'm celibate, but I still have sex. So, but he was mostly vegetarian. My teacher in Japan, Gudo Wafu Nishijima Roshi, was also mostly vegetarian, but he ate meat sometimes, and he considered it, when I had a conversation with him about it, he said, "No, you should keep being a vegetarian," is what he told me. "It's better to be a vegetarian." And he said something like, "I just eat meat out of long-standing habit." So there you go. Another thing, when we used to have our retreats at Tokein Temple, which is a Buddhist temple in Japan. Now, most Buddhist temples in Japan are vegetarian. They only serve vegetarian food in the temple. However, not all of them are, because Tokein, whenever they served us food, one of the meals every time would have a little bit of meat in it. It wouldn't be like they hand you a steak or a hamburger or a pork chop or something, but you get a bowl of mixed vegetables, potatoes and pimon. What is pimon in English? Green peppers and stuff, and all mixed together. And there'd be little bits of ground beef, or I think it was ground beef in there. And as a guy who was a vegetarian for a long time, I didn't like eating that meal, but I ate it. I accepted the idea that you should eat what's given. However, when Nishijima Roshi turned it over to me to run the retreats, one of the first things I did was I went to the monk who was cooking, and I requested him, just please don't put any meat in our food. And then from then on, we didn't get the meat dish at Tokein. So there's that. Nishijima Roshi also told a story once of, I don't know exactly how this worked out or how this, he ended up in this situation, but he was in some situation in a temple where they got a donation of, I think it was sushi. And so even though they weren't serving meat in the temple, here they get all this lovely raw fish, and the monks just went crazy, like, they were eating it, gobbling up, and he describes the situation as they were just like, just feverish at eating this meat, and he thought, maybe the strict prohibition of eating meat makes people kind of unbalanced. That's what Nishijima Roshi said. So there you go. I don't know if I have provided a definitive answer to my questioner's question. I'll just say that there are various ways of doing it. As for myself, I became a vegetarian before I got into Buddhism. I had a friend in junior high school named Scott Weinkoop. I don't know if he's still out there or watching my videos, but he was a vegetarian, which was very rare in a place like Wadsworth, Ohio in 1975 or 6 or whatever this was. And he told me about it, and he told me why he was. He was a conscientious vegetarian. His mother was like that because they didn't believe in killing animals for food. And I thought, wow, that's a great idea. And I remained a semi-meat eater all through high school, but once I got out of high school and into college, I cut it out. I cut all the meat out of my diet, which luckily there was a Taco Bell in the town, and they served bean burritos. Didn't have any meat in them. It cost 50 cents. So I was like a junk food vegetarian is what I'm saying. I wasn't like a health food vegetarian. And I've remained a vegetarian ever since, and I'm glad of it, and I feel good about it. My wife is not a vegetarian. My wife's family, they're not vegetarians. So I'm out around meat all the time, but I don't eat it myself. And I'm happy with that decision. I don't really think about it all that much, about the reasons why. I don't sit there going, I shall not eat this meat because it is a slaughtered animal. It's just become more of a thing. I can no more imagine enjoying eating a piece of meat than I would enjoy eating a shoe. It just doesn't come up as something that looks like food to me. So there you go. That's the longest, most convoluted answer ever given to a simple question. So I'm going to cut it off right now and say, if you want to donate to me answering more convoluted questions, you can go to the URL you are seeing on the screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually only ways of making a living, so I appreciate your support. But as always, you don't got to pay if you don't want to pay, because I'm offering this for free. We will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey Ziggy. How you doing in your sunbeam? Do you like me because I'm a vegetarian? Or you just like me because I feed you meat? Maybe both. Alright, we'll see you later, Ziggy. Enjoy your sunbeam.